I mean, Marie Curie was extraordinary through and through. She won 2 Nobel Prizes. And I think it's sort of, in a way for me, the great force is you win one and you're not satisfied, so you win it in physics, you retrain in chemistry, and you win it again. I think that's pretty cool. But it has so much relevance and importance, her win, because, you know, originally she was not on the nomination. It was Henri Becquerel and her husband Pierre Curie who was on the nomination, and her husband stood up for her, as very few men would have at that time,
and
in the early 1900s, and even today, and said, you know, if there's a Nobel Prize to be won, then we're both going to be on that nomination. And he had it changed. You know, because really the pursuit of radioactivity, they did discover it together, but it was her notion that led them into their, you know, hours and hours of study and careful manual labour and careful scientific brain work, and that it was her notion that let the whole thing erupt.
In the film, Marie says that she thinks people have difficulty separating her work and her private life. I'm intrigued, how much do you think that was the issue at hand, and how much is that still an issue for women today?
Well, I think this is a problem today, but this is very interesting to realize that the thing that we actually attribute to men, like for example, we will say this is a very difficult character, you know, this is not a very likable person, but he's a genius. So he's a genius, he has a right to be not likable, has the right to be a difficult character. This thing we accept it very easily for men. When it comes to women, our first quality has to be our sweetness and our kindness. Yet, you know, like, I don't know, myself, the people I know, the women that I know, I don't think sweet is like among the 5 first adjectives that I were qualified them with. So this is this image of the women, the eternal female, and the la femme, and, you know, in all the cultures. So yes, and, you know, back in 1880, to have a man who wants a wife to be his equal, his companion, you know, that they will share their work, etc., that is somehow very modern, and even for today is very modern. So yes, she was very modern, he was very modern, and the couple, even for today, is a very modern couple, yes.
Would you agree?
100%. I mean, I think Marie and Pierre Curie had a very inspiring marriage at any point in history. I think, you know, they charmed one another. They were sort of independent. They didn't really need outside influence. They were completely satisfied in love and work, and they changed the world together. I mean, I find it sort of fills me with optimism and a kind of sort of magical glow when I think about what it must have felt like that night when, you know, after the sort of ultimate all-nighter, as I see it, they actually isolated radium for the first time and saw that it glowed green. I mean, can you imagine that moment where you're holding almost the future of the human race in your hands, but you don't know it? And how magical and incandescent that little moment must have been. You know, it's almost like knowing that you hold something and it could change the world, but as yet, it's just yours. I mean, I find it so beautiful and profound. And of course, you know, then it did sort of, the film is really, our film Radioactive is not just a biography of Marie Curie, it's a biography of radioactivity and, you know, the fallout from that moment where everything was precious and perfect, to when it's no longer in your control, and the phenomenon that is obviously incredibly powerful and incredibly important also has, you know, very, very dangerous potential. It's very awesome. It's very awe-inspiring.
And she was also a mother of 2, which is something the movie dwells on, the difference between Marie, the scientist, and Marie, the mother. Do you think that's central to understanding her character, and also the way that society treats women differently as mothers?
I don't think she's certainly not a role model as a mother, I feel. I mean,
No,
she's a sort of,
because when
she's not maternal.
No, and when you, I mean, the thing that you see about her motherhood, she has this big book where she has measured her kids, like she measured everything.
She's observed them closely.
Yes, so very precisely, you know, the length from here to here, around the head, like everything. That she has a very scientific way of loving her kids. But again, you know, you cannot be a magnificent scientist, a perfect spouse, a perfect mother, you know, the day has only 24 hours. Like even Superman cannot make all of that in one. So yeah, obviously when you're this passionate and this focused, these are the things that you cannot be the best at everything. Yeah.
No, and later in life you look back on it and you can say I wasn't the best mother. I think, you know, our film has never tried to make a paragon of virtue out of Madame Curie, because if she was sweet and lightness and the perfect mother and a brilliant scientist, she wouldn't be Madame Curie. She might be your, you know, your wife or girlfriend, but, you know, we have to deal with someone with flaws as well as brilliance, because that's what makes the person, for me, so interesting. And it's discovering the flaws and the realization of those and the regrets and the things she did wrong. I mean, one of the most moving bits of the film to me is when she, you know, because she was passionate but didn't always have time to indulge it. And after Pierre's death, when she confesses to Paul Langevin that, you know, Pierre Curie once said to her, I could never imagine a life before I met you. And she remembers that she never said anything back, and she can never get that moment back, and it's gone, you know. If we don't have a woman with regrets, I think we haven't got a real woman, have we?
And do you think that today women, particularly women in power, are held to a different standard, a different account than their male counterparts?
Well, of course there are differences, because we have, behind us we have 5,000 years of culture. So, you know, you cannot just raise that in 5 days, 5 years, you know, it takes a long time. But there are things that, you know, it's the patriarchal society makes an image of the woman and the image of the man. So there are things that are acceptable for a woman. For example, she can be sensitive, she can cry, but if a man cries, this is not acceptable. It goes also in the other way. But, you know, like sometimes I have heard about myself, you know, you look so bossy, but I'm not bossy, I'm just a boss. So I'm just behaving like the job that I have. I have to do that. So, or, you know, if I'm angry, then I become emotional. So, you know, and next is like I have hormonal problems. You know, I mean, men, they have hormonal problem too, but they would never relate that to their hormones. When it comes to women, it's always the hormone comes first. So, etc., etc. So, you know, and we don't advance always, you know, like we advance sometimes and we go back sometimes. Like in our film, I know that Madame Curie it was much easier for her at her time to make her science studies that it was for her daughter, because you had this window of freedom between 1900 and 1910, and then that was closed again after the First World War. You just see the number of, you know, this clinic that make abortion in America, for example, closing. We are not saying that the women that are getting more rights and more freedom when you close this kind of center. So yeah, we just don't. It depends very much at the time in the world. So now, for example, we are in a very conservative time. So obviously, as soon as it is conservative, the women, they have to suffer from it. So, you know, we will celebrate a man who will become a father at the age of 75, and we'll say, oh, great. Well, I mean, we can discuss that. But, you know, like a woman who has a younger boyfriend, then it's a name. What do they call these women that they have younger boyfriend? Yes, cougar. So a woman is a cougar, but a man who is with a younger woman, he's not the lion. We don't call him like any kind of animal. So yeah, there are differences. But that said, I mean, it's also our responsibility, we as women, to change that, because, you know, we can complain about the men attitude, but until we embrace that and we perpetuate that, because like in this patriarchal schema, who is teaching the value to his kids is the mother. So we have the responsibility to raise them up differently. Yeah. We have to give them the power to believe that they can do anything as human beings.
Rosamund, would you agree?
Yeah, because also women have swallowed the patriarchal system and the patriarchal narrative, and that's, you know, they're raised in it, and they're judging other women accordingly. Not by, you know, it takes a long time to free yourself from, you don't realise how many constructs are in your brain because of that narrative and your expectations. I mean, you know, for even, you know, the way that something like the Daily Mail will, you know, always remark if they're telling a story on how old the woman is, and the man, you know, I mean, sometimes it's humorous, you know, X-woman 53 with X-woman 23 and this man plus, you know, whatever, and the man's age is never mentioned. But it's women who are asking for the age to be declared. Men don't give a toss about it, actually. It's other women who want to know and judge themselves, measure themselves and judge themselves accordingly. That's what's, I think that's part of what's got to change as well.
We cannot change the world if we don't change ourselves, basically.
No.
This is it. We cannot ask, because while we are going to gain freedom, the men, they will lose stuff. So why would they lose, like clapping in their hand, being very happy? So, our rights, we have to go and take it. But we have to be conscious of it, and we have to behave accordingly. So we cannot always blame the other one.
No,
I think it's time for us, to wake up ourselves and see how do we behave, and what can we make, and what examples do we give to the girls,
And Marie Curie gives a very good one, because she lived equality. She took it as her right. I don't think she was too busy to sort of fight for it. She just owned it. She went by herself as a brain, as a scientist. As a scientist, she was equal, and that's all that really mattered. She knew that if you take two human bodies and, after death you dissect them and you take out the brain, there's no difference between a masculine brain and a feminine brain. And that is how she lived.
And factually, there is no difference. This is facts. That's science.
Clearly, the film's about the world of science, but the film industry has recently been rocked by the Me Too movement. Do you think that's a watershed moment for the industry and for society? And do you think that's what we need to finally shift the narrative?
Well, when we started making Radioactive, just even not go to the Me Too and the feminist movement. As a matter of fact, we are half of the population in the world. This is mathematics. So it's very normal that half of the story of the world would be about us. But this is not the fact. This is number one. Then if that is about us, we're always related to someone. So you start with somebody's daughter, and then girlfriend, and then you're the wife, and then you're the mother, and then you're the woman who has been cheating on, and then you become the grandmother, and this is how it goes. It's very rare to have this kind of thing, this kind of film. So this is factual, and this is also factual that, like if you are a woman and a man and you're in Hollywood and you have the same competences, they will trust more a man to give him the money, I don't know why, than to give it to the woman. This is also something. But again, if we want, like nomination, if we want presence, we have to be also extremely present. You cannot make few films by women and half of the nomination. The real question is that why don't we have more film directed by women? Well, the reason is that how many girls do believe in themselves to become directors? So this is a change of culture, and that is a much deeper subject, but you have to fight that from the root. So these movements, they're great, and I think they open the eyes of many people. And I heard somebody told me, that is going to be now all this mediocre film made by mediocre women. Well, for 100 years, mediocre men made lots of mediocre film. So what happened? Nothing.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Rosamund, you recently played the journalist Marie Colvin, another woman who, in her own way, changed the world and was equally powerful. It's no coincidence you're choosing these roles, is it?
Well, I'm actually interested in women who speak the truth to power, and I think if anything comes out of the Me Too movement, it's that girls are going to have the courage to do that in our industry. I'm certainly the young girls that I'm working with now on the series I'm shooting, I'm encouraging them to do that at every turn. If something's not right, speak up about it. Don't say, I've got to do this sex scene on Monday and nobody's discussed it with me. Make sure someone discusses it with you, or don't show up. Make sure you have that conversation. Make sure you're protected. Speak your truth to power. And Marie Colvin did that. She gave a voice to the voiceless. She found the most vulnerable people on earth and told the truth about their suffering. And Marie Curie spoke the truth to power at every turn. She went before the French government and said, "This is what your system is shoddy. Men are being, men are dying on your battlefields unnecessarily. They're being amputated without due cause. Let me have my mobile X-ray units, and I will show you a different way to do things." So I think the things I'm drawn to are courage and speaking one's truth. those
and this is why we want to work with her, because you need an intelligent, fierce woman, and then of course you want to work with Rosamund. This is the result of that.
I'm intrigued to see what you do next.
Oh, well, she's fictional, the character I'm doing at the moment, but still I try, hopefully I'll bring the same qualities to bear. Yeah.
we have a common project, maybe.
We do, yeah.
Yes.
We'll bring it out in a few years.
Yes.
We're working on something.
Watch this space.